Hi, Doc. We are live.
Yeah, sawa.
Hi everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our today's series of mental health webinars. We'd like to thank you all for joining us today. Our today's speaker is none other but Sophie Muriuki. She is a practicing clinical psychologist, and she's a certified professional mediator. And her areas of interest are working with children, that is the preteens and below. She's also, her interest also in couples, adults, and trauma therapy. She's also undertaken specialized training in art therapy, skills for psychological recovery, and also psychological first aid. And she's also an eye movement desensitization and reprocessing practitioner. Welcome, Sophie Muriuki.
Thank you so much, Cecilia. Asante sana. Good evening, everyone.
I think it's safe to say that we're all looking forward to having this conversation today or tonight. And even for those who may watch this later, karibuni sana. Um, I mean, I think let's just dive right in, right? I feel like the expectations are quite high, so we do hope to be able to answer a few questions tonight and even just engage in conversation. Um, so we wanted to discuss, dealing with relationship stress, separation, and divorce. Given that these are things that we are living with in our communities and experiencing it as well in our own homes. Let's see what we're able to unpack tonight. So even just by starting with the basics, a relationship being the way in which two people behave towards one another or deal with each other, whether it's a loving or sexual friendship between two people. The idea behind the definition of a relationship is basically connection. If we look at the Oxford Dictionary's definition, connection, connection, connection. I think that's what I'd like us to, one of the things we need to remember is how two people connect. And so then when we look at separation, it's when people disconnect or tend to spend time away from each other, or when a married couple decide to live apart while they're still legally married. So that's usually the first step, sort of, and then you head on to the legal ending of a marriage or divorce. In order to be in a relationship, some of the requirements one needs to, engage in is that it should be mutually satisfying for both partners. Um, and then also, then the other thing to think about is that each partner may need to, in one way, shape, or form, or in one, at specific times, they need to sacrifice sometimes their own needs and desires in order to meet those of their partner. So we tend to invest time, make time, invest energy into satisfying the needs of our partners. But the thing to remember is that you cannot meet all the needs and desires of your partner at the same time or at one specific time, and not all needs and desires can be met by one person. It takes two to tango, as it were. So the idea is that we should learn to manage expectations. So when you look at any relationship or situationship that you might be in, ask yourself the following questions. What are your partner's needs and desires as you understand them? Because then sometimes we say we know someone's needs and desires, and if you have a conversation with your partner or with the other individual, you really don't have an understanding of them. But it's always good to start from the point of understanding. So as you understand them, what are your partner's needs and desires that they expect will be met in this relationship or in this situation? What are you willing to do to meet the said needs and desires? You as an individual, what are you willing to do to meet the needs and desires of your partner? What do you expect your partner to do to meet your own needs and desires? And in this endeavor, have you ever felt let down, or have you been let down um, in meeting these needs? Have you also let down your partner in the expectations to having their needs met? And then also, it's always good to do like a postmortem, so to speak. In other words, to evaluate what you feel you've sacrificed in order to meet the needs and desires of your partner. Because sometimes you feel like a lot of people tend to, state that they feel that they're always giving, 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 that they don't feel like them having their needs met. You often hear people saying they sacrificed a lot. They gave up careers, they gave up opportunities, they gave up this, that, and the other in order to meet the needs of their loved ones. So, what is it that you feel you've sacrificed in order to meet the desires of your partner? But then we need to bear in mind we're having this conversation as men and women, as husbands and wives. We tend to have different amounts of power and flexibility in an effort to, one, initiate change and even to resist the pressure to change. Yeah. So even as you're trying to meet the desires of your partner, whether it's a marriage or relationship, whatever the case may be, we need to also remember the gender roles. We need to remember or have that in mind. and remember that men and women indeed are different, and that roles, expectations are something that need to be looked at and evaluated. So then if you look at your own situation, when I say situation again, I mean marriage, relationship, whatever thing you're in at this point in time. What are the traditional gender roles in your own relationship? Even make comparisons with relationships you had while you were younger. Do you think the gender roles you expressed at that time and now are the same? If you are in a relationship now and looking to get married, do you expect to have traditional gender roles met? Do you expect to, to be, if you're a woman, do you expect to be a traditional woman in the sense, a traditional man in the sense? So when you look at gender roles quickly, men are meant to be the provider. They're the ones who are the head of the family to make sure, the family has a roof over their heads and food in their belly and so on and so forth. So in other words, paid employment. But when we have when we try and enforce this role of a primary provider, does that mean then that men don't desire intimacy or closeness? Does that mean that they cannot be nurturers? Does that mean that men cannot change diapers, or have heart-to-heart with their children? And conversely, when you look at women, feminine roles, who are expected to be nurturers, who are expected to facilitate an environment for their partner and their children that is conducive for growth, for the family to charge and move forward. But then does that mean that they cannot be a working mom? Does that mean that they cannot advance their careers? For instance, if you're in a relationship or a situation where you and your partner are both healthcare workers, how do your gender roles come into play in that situation? Have you had that discussion even? Or are we in a space where we are just making assumptions? The guy is saying, Kwani, see, these are things that don't even need to be discussed. If we get married, go to the kitchen, do this, do that, and the other. And yet, this is a career woman who is a healthcare worker. And conversely, as a woman, are you expecting things from your man that you've not had a conversation about? So it's very important to discuss gender roles when you're looking at relationship stress, because these are things that tend to tear people apart. When you work on assumptions, then you find that people get married, they've not managed the expectations or even discussed them, and then they're thrown into a home where you're now in a marriage, you get into a fight, there is no saying that me have gone home, because guess what, you're at home. So then this is a conversation that people need to have, that can't be stated enough. When you look at couples research, there's an assumption that even one's birth order comes into play. So then that one's birth order, despite even cultural differences or upbringing and races or whatever the case may be, so if people have the same birth order, so if you have two firstborns who come from opposite ends of the world, it's assumed that they might have certain personality characteristics that are common. So then another assumption is that, for example, firstborns tend to be responsible. They take on tasks as, they accept the challenge and they accept it as their responsibility. No questions asked. It's my duty, it's my job. And then the assumption of lastborns is that others will get things done, they'll be taken care of, and so on and so forth. This may be a dated view to some people, but then to others, it's something that's been tried and tested. So then in your own situation, what is your birth order and that of your partner? Do you find that you often come into strife because one of you is a firstborn, the other is a lastborn? So the lastborn is just easy breezy, waiting for things to be done, and the firstborn is always feeling like, I'm always the one taking on things, I'm always the one taking responsibility, I'm the only responsible person here, and so on and so forth. So then when we fight, we tend to focus on the negative aspects of our partners. When you think of the last fight you had in your situation, in your relationship, where was your focus? What had happened? Was it that your partner had, borrowed your car and Kate came back with dents? Is it that it was their turn kununua skuma and they didn't? Whatever the trigger for the fight was, think about it, reflect on it. more often than not, we tend to focus on the negative aspects of our partners when we're fighting. We tend to also get defensive, which keeps us from evaluating our own contribution to the situation or to the conflict. Then we tend to blame our partner as the cause of failure. But then at the end of the day, we need to be honest, and we need to actually now just take an honest look at the situation and say, okay, how did I contribute to this? How did my partner contribute to this? How did we contribute to this, and how did we get here? Maybe it's easier said than done, but then we'll be able to go through some of the things we can do when dealing with relationship stress. So then if we look at, this is a theory called the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. Apologies for the overlay in the imaging. So then with there's a group of researchers, the Gottmans, a married couple who do a lot of research with couples, and they brought it down to a science where they said that the greatest predictor of divorce is how we behave according to this theory of the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. So the first thing is that the first part of the theory is criticism. You know, when we are in a conflict with one another and there's a hot fight ensuing, you tend to criticize your partner. You know, so you're like, you're so lazy. You complain without blame instead of saying, using, you know, the good communication skills that we all know and have learned of I statements, for example. It becomes an accusatory thing of you. So you're so lazy, you can never do anything right. You're this, you're that, and the other. You're so selfish. So that's the first one. And then you get into another stage in the Four Horsemen known as contempt, where you actually now act more superior than your partner, where you also show, and it tends to show in your language and even in your nonverbals. Are you the one for rolling eyes and sneering, you know, smacking your lips? All those things can be read when conversating with your partner. So then when you have that contemptuous language of, you know, whatever were you thinking, you're so stupid, and, you know, it becomes abusive, and you're there just shouting down at your partner, then that's another predictor. So then guess what? If you're the recipient of this kind of behavior, you will become defensive. Defensiveness takes over, and you don't even think about your judgment is clouded. You don't think about what's happening. You're just feeling attacked. So you tend to go on the defensive. And then after that, then you get into a place of stonewalling, where you just feel like, what's even the point? You've been attacked, you've been defensive, so you just create this wall where you're done. You're just like those ones. So the Four Horsemen, when it's used as a science, they say that after marriage, if you're experiencing the Four Horsemen in your relationship, as it were, then the Gottmans predict that within 5.6 years after marriage, they are likely to get divorced. The fact of the matter is, when you reflect on the Four Horsemen that we've gone through, we all tend to use this from time to time. Yeah, we all tend to be defensive. We tend to, once in a while, we feel frustrated and angry and say things that we really don't mean, but they come across as critical or contemptuous language. But then what really matters is how we repair these things, how we repair the conflicts. Do you tend to sweep things under the carpet, or do you tend to pretend it never happened? How is it that you're repairing that situation? That is what counts. So then if you're just experiencing the Four Horsemen all the time and doing nothing about it, then again, it's a predictor of drawing further and further apart. But the good news is, when you address things and you address them well and listen to each other's point of view, and you figure out your roles and take responsibility for what was done, then we do stand a chance. We do stand a chance of having satisfying and fulfilling relationships. The predictors of survival, well, according to the science again, it's that when we have positive interactions, we tend to have longer lasting relationships. When we, like for example, if during a conflict, imagine again the last fight you had, how do you think your facial expression was or your body language? Imagine for a moment if you are able to somehow show empathy, if you are able to reflect back to your partner and understand what it is they were complaining about, then it's said that your relationship is more likely to succeed. If during that conflict you're able to engage in positive interactions, your relationship is more likely to succeed. So the predictor of survival is that the more positive interactions supersede negative ones, then these increase the likelihood of success, right? So again, let's go back to the four horsemen and how we can actually stop them. So we've talked about criticism, verbally attacking one's personality or character. You might think it's constructive criticism, but put yourself in your partner's shoes when you are criticizing them and try and hear how you sound. So rather than taking that approach, it's better to again use your good communication skills. Talking about your feelings and trying to express yourself by using I statements, and expressing a positive need. In matters of contempt, for example, um, instead of attacking one's sense of self and becoming abusive or insulting them, then build a character or a culture of appreciation. I beg your pardon. Remind yourself of your partner's positive qualities. Um, Find gratitude for positive actions. Be able to just appreciate what they're doing and who they are in your life rather than being abusive. In terms of defensiveness, so victimizing yourself to, try to ward off a perceived attack. You feel attacked, you feel like things are just being thrown at you left, right, and center. Take responsibility. Take a step back and actually say, what is my contribution to this conflict? Accepting your partner's perspective and even offer an apology of any wrongdoing. Um, in terms of stonewalling, you're trying to withdraw, yeah, to avoid conflict and convey disapproval. So the idea behind stonewalling again is that you've been hit by all these abusive statements, you've been criticized, you just feel like, so where am I here? Am I even worth it? So you put up a wall, you withdraw, you become distant, you could even leave, you could even separate. But rather than do that, we're saying, take a break and spend that time self-soothing or doing something that is distracting. So if you need to do like a breathing exercise because you're feeling like tempers are flaring up and you just need to take 5 and zone out. And just try and take control of your breathing, bring down your tempers, and you'll be in a better headspace to actually deal with whatever it is that you're in conflict about. So then when you're looking at dealing with uh, separation and divorce or divorce, it's not all doom and gloom. There are things that can be done in an effort to rebuild the relationship if that is what you want to do. There is the idea that, maybe you've separated, and sometimes people try and repair or try and work out their differences by seeking professional help. So then we want to look at what it takes to build a strong relationship. So let me just give a quick scenario. So if a couple comes in, they're just not able to get along, they're not able to hear each other out, and they're actually considering separation, then we even assess what is going on with you emotionally and psychologically, for one. Another thing we want to look at is how satisfied do you feel in your relationship? Um, do you even know one another? So you maybe want to try and see. Often we ask, basic questions about each other. So you ask your spouse, you ask one spouse to tell you about the other spouse, their likes and dislikes, their interests, who is their best friend, what is their favorite color, favorite foods. Yani those basics sometimes get lost. So then we do all these assessments in an effort to try and see at which point of the spectrum is this relationship. And then from there, we're able to come into this concept that I'm showing you, that's called the sound relationship house. Again, this is what it takes to build a strong relationship. So you start at, like you would any other house, you start from the ground up. So the foundation of it is that you build what are called love maps.
Point of order, Sophie.
Sorry?
Kindly adjust your volume for the speakers to clearly hear you.
Okay. Sorry
Thank
about
you.
that. Perhaps I should even put maybe earphones if that would help. Is it any better?
Yes, proceed on.
Okay. So then we're talking about trying to build up our relationships to make them stronger. Yeah, like I was saying, build from the ground up. Like you would a house, you start with a foundation. So foundation involves your love map, knowing one another's world, knowing your partner's likes and dislikes, like I was saying earlier, just knowing who they are and what it entails to be who they are. Again, those basics of favorite foods, best friends, hobbies, where they work, um, be able to even give their job description. What do they have any bank accounts? If so, how many? With which bank? These are things that matter. And it means that you actually sit down with your partner and have that conversation and ask that your partner, who do you bank with? What branch? Because then if you're in a serious relationship, then these are things you need to know. So then from there on up, you want to share fondness and admiration for one another, because then you cannot be drawing away from each other and expecting for the relationship to work. So then you also want to be able to turn towards instead of away from each other. So looking towards one another rather than away from each other. And that is in terms of building intimacy and working on your relationship to make it stronger. Your physical relationship, your sex life is important in a long-term relationship. And so then even just being able to understand each other's likes and dislikes in that department, looking at the positive perspective. Um, and all the while, as you're building this relationship, there are key pillars. You have the trust and you have the commitment. So are you committing to this relationship, and do you trust your partner? Do you trust that, you can hold up this thing that you're building together? So of course, as you're getting to know each other more and more, you will get into conflicts with one another, and fighting is normal. A lot of people don't think that's the case and tend to shy away from conflict or move away from conflict. So it's important to accept your partner's influence. It's important to be able to dialogue about problems. And even as you're doing so, check yourself. Have a quick check-in with yourself and evaluate, what emotion am I having as we're having this conflict? Even rate it from a scale of 1 to 10. How angry am I? So what you're doing, even as this is happening, is that you're being aware of how bad the situation might be. And when you realize how angry you are, it's very likely that you're going to be able to actually stop what you're doing, stop saying hurtful things, take a deep breath, and just try and reevaluate. So even when you're in conflict, it's important to be able to communicate well. And sometimes it's even good to just take a 5-minute break. Even as you're fighting, just say, I need 5. I need 5. If you need to walk away from the room, that's fine. Actually, even say, look, let's take a 20-minute break and then come and revisit this. There's nothing wrong with that, because then it will force you all to drink water, go to the washroom and breathe, and then come back and try and tackle what it is that's weighing you down. So when we say that we want to make life dreams come true, as you engage in a long-term relationship, you tend to build a life together. People buy property together, people invest, that kind of thing. People even, expand their family and have children. So then you're actually now sitting down together and looking at the bigger picture. Where do we want this relationship to go? And how can we achieve? How can we get to our destination? So then that's how you come and work together to make the dreams come true. So as you've built all that in your sound relationship house, you've come to the top where you've created a shared meaning. So that means you've worked together for your relationship for common good. So then you've been able to talk about where you want your relationship to go, how you feel like it would look in 10 years. Do you actually now see each other old and gray together? Given that a plan is a plan. And this last year has shown us we plan and then things happen. Or you plan and then one of you is transferred and you're now in a long distance relationship. That notwithstanding, if you've created this house and created it well and built it with a strong foundation, then you can manage even with in terms of adversity. So let's quickly look at top tips so that we can now get into questions and answers, because I know they're coming and they're in waiting. So it's important that we learn to separate work from home. So you separate work and home. So you separate work from family and home from colleagues. Yeah. So if you've had a bad day at the office, it's okay. Lakini now don't bring it home to the family. Conversely, if you've had a rough night at home, again, it's okay. But do you then take it to the office or to work, to hospital the next day? So then that not bringing work from home, moods from work, and so on and so forth can be quite tricky. So it's important to understand yourself well. It's important to be able to even know who you are emotionally. When you get charged, what do you need to do? When you get stressed, what do you need to do to be able to calm down? And even just the importance of having supervision. If your work is weighing you down and getting more and more heavy, then it's important that you self-care. And one of the ways as healthcare workers we do so is seek supervision. We need to manage our relationship stress. So then being able to have these sit downs and iron things out is very important as we manage our expectations. So it's not at a, your partner is going to solve all your problems. It's that you're working together to solve a problem. When it comes to separation or divorce, the idea is that you understand no matter where you are in that spectrum. So if you're dealing with relationship stress, you're separated, or you're getting a divorce, you're dealing with a loss. You're dealing with loss of status, loss of a significant other, the loss of your role in that relationship. And sometimes when we have all these multiple losses and we leave them unchecked, then it actually leads to complicated grief. Yeah, even in a separation divorce situation. So it's important that even as you're going through separation or divorce, that you actually take care of that process. And people do tend to come in and say, we are splitting up and we want to split up well. And there are things that we look at and checks and balances, just to make sure that, fine, if this is a decision you've made as a couple, what is it that you need to do? What goals can we set to make sure that you separate or divorce well? If children are involved, how is this going to impact on them? Because then don't forget, in this hostile environment, if there are children involved, they're experiencing the same hostility in their young and not very capable bodies. So their minds are being exposed to this, and then they grow up with their own insecurities. So then there's ways that you can mitigate these things. If separation or divorce is imminent, it can happen and it can happen well. Some other top tips. I think the number one top tip is seek professional help. If you're in a relationship where there's constant conflict and you just seem to be butting heads all the time, seek professional help. Things that you can do in the meantime is have a weekly conference. So having a weekly meeting with your partner where you're able to even say, how has the week been? In terms of our relationship, how do you feel the week has gone for you? How do you feel? Is there anything you feel that may have been said or done to you that is causing you to feel unloved in this situation? And being able to communicate with one another, create boundaries as well, so that you don't end up saying hurtful things or doing hurtful things, is important. So you set your goals in that weekly conference, you actually set an agenda and even have guidelines. So there'll be no abuse. Is it that you don't want phones to be looked at? And of course, I'm cognizant of the fact that some people are in long distance relationships. That doesn't mean we can't have the weekly check-in. So it can be video, audio, whatever the case may be, make the time to have your weekly conference. If weekly seems too far gone or too far stretched, you can even have a daily check-in with one another. At the end of the day, check in with your partner, ask them, how are you? How was your day? Is there anything you need help with? Did something happen and, maybe I need your assistance? And even ask them, what's your plan for tomorrow? Try and understand what they're doing the next day. because then it shows you care, it shows you're interested, and it tends to break down walls that maybe are being built as we go along. Communicating well is another story, because then you need to practice good communication skills. Use I statements. Don't have confrontational language. Don't be abusive. If you're sitting down with your partner, show them that you're there, you're attentive. Put the phone away. If it's virtually, then be attentive, because now you're seeing this barrier actually means that you have to do more work to make sure that the other person is feeling heard. Um, it's important to also reflect and understand one's emotional background. So then the idea is thinking about how you understand emotions and even how you express them, or how they were expressed as you were growing up. So for instance, being able to look at how was anger, love, pride, sadness, how are some of these emotions expressed for you as you were growing up? And for your partner, have that conversation, because maybe someone was brought up in an abusive home, and so their definition of love and yours may not be the same, but it's an assumption that you've been working with all along. So just being able to understand one's emotional background is very important. Work together in identifying and defining your roles. So if, for example, if you're both healthcare workers, at home, who does what? Um, who is responsible for the shopping, for the cooking, for this, that, and the other? Don't make assumptions. Make clear, define your roles clearly, because then that way I know what you expect from me, you know what to expect, and we end up working together in building a healthy relationship. What do you also expect from your partner's family? What do you expect from yourself in the relationship? What do you expect from your support network, as it were? These are conversations that we sometimes tend to overlook or take for granted, and yet they can help deal with relationship stress. And even as we conclude, I think the thing to remember is that sometimes all we need to know is the alternatives to some of our old destructive habits. Um, so if it's an issue with anger, substance use, whatever the case may be, seek professional advice, because then you're able to look at the situation rather than at a glance, but get into it and understand what's happening, and seek alternatives to, because sometimes we tend to just react and we don't know the alternatives. We don't know how to communicate well. You're telling me communicate, and me, I thought I'm communicating, kumbe hata I don't know. Establish boundaries with maybe extended families, being able to even have conversation around how extended families should behave or how often they should visit, being able to have conversations about religion or spirituality. Maybe there are things that we're doing, and if we just knew the alternative, all would be lost. So at the end of the day, when you're in a relationship, you've made a choice to seek a companion, to seek someone who you want to share your life with, and you want, you have a capacity for change. So at the end of the day, what choice do you want to make as far as that particular relationship is concerned? If it's fighting for the relationship, if it's separating for some time and then coming back together to revisit, if it's divorcing well, you have a choice and you have a capacity for change. So the question is, what choice are you going to make? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sophie, for that wonderful presentation. Wow, there's a lots of questions, and we would like to start off with an anonymous question. Someone asking, what about when roles get reversed, and what was agreed on changes, e.g., the lady becomes the breadwinner when a man loses his job or business is down, but the male partner not willing to chip in on those roles the lady played. How do we handle this, considering there is a burden to the female partner? Sophie?
That's a very pertinent question, a very real one, especially, I guess, in the last year. Things have changed. We've been taught that what we thought we knew, we really don't know. And again, yes, people have been forced to reverse roles. Again, having that conversation, having a sit down, is important in trying to see where is one partner feeling like they're the ones bearing the brunt of everything. For them to say that, it means they've observed something. They've observed that maybe their partner is not as active in carrying their weight. So if they've reversed roles, have they actually talked about reversing roles? Have they actually had that conversation? So that's a question I would throw back to that particular listener. Have you had that conversation? Do you feel it has been had adequately? Maybe you need to take a step further and engage in like mediation, for example.
Also, Sophie, as we proceed on, kindly adjust your mic for the listeners to be able to hear you clearly.
Okay.
Also, an anonymous, yes. So also someone else asking, what challenges would you say are unique to couples who choose to remain child-free?
Okay. So then, first of all, they've made the decision to remain child-free. And so they want to know, repeat the question, please. What's unique?
What challenges would you say are unique to couples who choose to remain child-free?
Okay. Off the top of my head, I would imagine if you've made that choice, then maybe your extended family or support system doesn't understand that that's a choice you've made. So we're now even looking at stigma. We're looking at all the questions like, mumeka, that kind of thing. So just trying to live your life the way the two of you have chosen is a challenge in itself. So that's one. And now then managing expectations of your extended family, of your community at large, it can weigh very heavily on a couple. And so the question would be, whose business is it that you've chosen to remain childless? Do you owe anyone an explanation as to why you're not going to have children? Are the both of you comfortable, or is it that one felt like they gave in to the other partner? So again, it's a matter of having that sit down and having that conversation with one another, and now agreeing, okay, so this is what we are facing. How do we face it? And then if you feel ill-equipped, again, seek professional help, because then you're not alone. Even maybe sitting together with groups of people who have chosen to be childless and having a support system in that way, then you're able to face those challenges together and feel like you're not so alone. So you create a community of like-minded couples. But yeah, I think those are some of the challenges that kind of couple would face.
Yes, thank you. And also Jacqueline Anundo adds that active listening is also very important in a relationship. Otherwise, if it is only one-sided, one partner may decide to shut off communication, right? Also, Joyce Ngugi is asking, the way points out that the way we fight matters, yet there are certain couples who fight viciously and incessantly but never break up and say they are okay. Would we problematize those couples who are warring by habit over many years? Sophie?
Once we see intimate partner violence, that means someone's safety is at risk, either one or both parties. And so, who are the complainants in that situation? Is it the couple or is it outsiders? If someone in the couple is complaining and they're the victim, so to speak, then trying to even just have a conversation with that person about ensuring their safety. And even sometimes you take survivors through like a safety sort of session where you teach them, you assess their situation and you teach them how to be safe in that environment, even as they prepare to leave, if that is the choice that they want to make. at the end of the day, as terrible as it is, if two consenting adults are choosing to stay in that kind of hostile environment, what can one do? You cannot literally separate a couple and tell each to go to a corner, and they've chosen to be in that situation. But then if one is the complainant and one is the victim in intimate partner violence, you can only do so much until the victim actually says enough is enough, I'm done, I'm out. But in the meantime, we can work together to build their self-esteem, to teach them how to ensure safety for themselves and children if they're involved. Yeah, and just to understand that it's not okay to be hit. It's not okay to smack each other or hurt each other. So whether it's both people being hostile to one another, is it actually okay to hurt your partner? Is it okay to inflict pain on your partner?
Thank you. Also, there's a question that someone asking, are there any statistics of COVID-19 related increases in relationship stress, divorce, and separation in Kenya among healthcare workers? Do you have that statistics?
I personally don't have the statistics in reference to healthcare workers. What I do know is that in the last year, there has been a surge in intimate partner violence, or more commonly known as gender-based violence, domestic violence, basically. There's been a surge in that. In terms of the statistics, we're maybe hoping that now we'll start to see or have a better understanding of what the last 1 year has done to our home situations. But the one that is for sure is that the cases being reported to the police, top of the list is intimate partner violence.
There's also another interesting question here. What happens when two lastborns are married to each other and neither is willing to grow up? Asking for a friend.
Asking for a friend. I think adulting is hard, and at some point you will have to grow up. Even as you engage in, as you build your career, as you build your life, and get into long-term relationships, liwe liwalo, you'll get to a point where you have to grow up. And I mean, even if the assumption is that maybe two lastborns cannot come together, at some point you find your footing. Maybe it will have a lot of conflict. But again, I think the number one thing is communication. So then it will get to a point where, let's say, children are involved. Who is going to take care of the children? So maybe one person will feel like they do most of the work. So they need to now come back and sit together and say, look, for real, this is what needs to happen. This is our situation. Hii kazi ni ya wewe, hii ni ya, just having that conversation and defining your roles. So, I mean, even that being said, does that mean that when firstborns get together, that it's assumed they'll both take responsibility and it will go seamlessly? That's an assumption. At the end of the day, when you get to the ground, then you will have to eventually make it work.
Daniel Mudibo asked, predictors of divorce are almost obviously yet doing the opposite of those things, like provide, be romantic, etc., still does not guarantee a successful marriage. He's asking, what's your take and input on that?
So then I would want to know the romantic aspect of it. Whose expectation was that? Because sometimes we love people the way we want to be loved, the concept of love languages. So sometimes we tend to give all the time, and yet your partner is more receptive to acts of service, for example. Yeah. So then I would advise that you go through the love languages. It's something you can even look up on the internet and try and get a better understanding of your own love language and your partner's love language. Because then if you feel like that is not working, then where is the disconnect? So maybe your partner prefers that, you change the tires on her car, or, you help her get a mat from whatever working station she may be at, or maybe your partner prefers public displays of affection. So again, having that conversation and trying to understand each other's love language is important in seeing through your question.
Also, Sarah is asking, first she starts with a statement that today there are many homes where the mommy or wife is handling the household bills, fees, investments, mentoring the children, etc. It is such a strain for many women. And during such times, honestly, there's no time or energy. So the question is, her first question is, what our fathers who are brought up and that is the so the first question is, our fathers who were brought up and bred up country were able to take care of their wives and children plus even extended family members. Today, even the nuclear family, having two dad has defeated many people. What went wrong in such families?
There are people, there are those who claim there's a disconnect. There's been a shift in generational roles and expectations. I guess the question is then, before you got together, did you go through a series of like if it's a marriage, did you go through premarital counseling where you are able to lay down your fears and talk about your expectations, talk about your roles? Is that something you are able to engage in? Because then sometimes we walk into things with expectation, and yet we have not told our partner our expectations. There's no way someone can know what you want from them if you don't communicate it to them. And then again, sometimes courting and having that period of dating is beneficial because you get to know each other a bit better. And so then you'll be able to see or gauge how responsible, in quotes, your partner might be. So if it's an issue where you feel that your man is not being a man, then define what a man is supposed to look like. Look for the kind of man that you want. But also maybe just sit and have that conversation with your partner and find out, why isn't this happening? This, I thought this is supposed to happen, but it's not. So then there's a lot of things that go into answering that question, because you need to also understand one's upbringing, cultural background, value and belief system, emotional background. All that needs to be looked at and understood in order to be able to understand the person that is standing in front of you and why they behave that the way they do.
Thank you for that. And Jalab asked, what are the main causes of divorce? Are the mobile phones and social media contributing to this? And what factors do they contribute in divorces?
I think social media has its benefits. It has allowed us to engage in a way that it sort of expands our community. And as with anything, it has its limits. Any tool that we use for communication has its advantages and disadvantages. Sometimes with social media, there's the Instagram life, there's the Twitter life, there's what I post. um Maybe now I put up a post of putting my feet up in Malindi, whatever the case may be. But truth be told, I'm sitting in my couch, suffering, hakuna stima, and I'm just, trying to imagine myself in a different environment. But someone may have seen my post and even now starts putting pressure on their partner. Again, we need to manage our expectations. So what you see on social media, I think I would say take with a pinch of salt. If you need to declutter your social media wardrobe the same way we declutter our physical wardrobes, then maybe do that. If you're following people or posts that don't make you feel good about yourself, that make you question yourself or lower your self esteem, you may need to rethink, why are you following this particular individual? Why are you following this page? What value is it adding to you and to your lives? But then if it's now weighing you down and weighing your relationship down, then have a think about that and investigate further what you can do to just be more emotionally stable.
An anonymous person asked this interesting question. How do you cope with a spouse who is envious of your success?
So then for me, I'm now curious as to how do you know that they're envious of your success? Um, has there been a change in their behavior? Have you talked to them about it? We really get scared of talking to each other. Like we said at the beginning, a relationship is about connection. Yeah. So then seek the connection. If you're more successful than your partner, what are you also doing to project that success? Are you sharing the success? Um, is it something that you can utilize to grow the relationship together? I would still say come back to the drawing board, come back to the table, sit and talk and connect.
Caroline also asked, would you say for reconciliation, it's important for both partners to want to work out their differences? And if one partner isn't willing to reconcile, then is that an unsalvageable relationship?
Well, again, we with relationships we make a choice of, to some extent, we make a choice of being in that relationship and being with that person. And so when in conflict, sometimes we expect things that the other person feels that they cannot deliver. So then if you're feeling that um, one person wants to sit and the other doesn't, is it that you have tried having a sit down on several occasions and it's just not working? Have you tried couples therapy? Have you tried mediation? Have you tried sitting with the wazee? Sometimes just being creative in the different sit down forums might help. Um, and also maybe also wanting to find out what if it's one party does not want to go to therapy or does not want to have the sit down. What is it about sitting down that is making them feel uncomfortable? Giving them the chance to also express themselves and share their concerns is important, because once they feel heard, then you've already started the process of dialogue and engaging with one another to connect.
Dr. Stewart asked, what's your take on the role of spirituality in getting a life partner?
What does spirituality mean for you as an individual? For one, what is your take on spirituality? Is it more, are you a religious individual? What religion do you ascribe to? What is your faith belief? Just getting your own initial view is important. And then trying to understand, okay, this is what I want. This is what I believe. This is my faith. What would I like in a partner? So even just being able to evaluate and see what kind of partner you'd like in terms of spiritually speaking, then it gives you uh, what do you call it, a quick start, so to speak. So then once you know your own faith system and faith value, and then what you think you would like in a partner, then at least now your eyes are open and you're more open-minded to that situation. And if you do have a partner, again, have that conversation, try and see what is your own partner's spirituality, what are their beliefs, what is their religion. um, if it's a matter of switching religions, if that's what you expect, are they willing to? Because sometimes people are scared of dating outside of their own religion because they feel like this one won't change for me. But sometimes you meet someone who is from a different religion and you've made an assumption without engaging with them. So come back to the table and speak to one another and try and understand each other's faith based system and what it means to each of you, and then collectively what you'd imagine it looks like.
Thank you. Also, another one. John asks, in situations where one partner doesn't want to disclose his or her past life, one may feel unloved. What will be the best action in that situation?
Please repeat. I don't think I got that.
The person asks, in situation where one does not want to reveal their past, how does one handle the situation?
I think I would want to understand why they're reluctant to do so. What is it about your past that you feel you don't want to share? Um, Again, if you have doubts, maybe it's worth having therapy. It's worth going for your own individual therapy to try and work out whatever you feel you're in conflict with yourself about. Um, then again, is this something you're wanting to disclose to someone you've just met? And so maybe the reluctance would be that you hardly know this person, you don't know whether you can trust them yet. You're scared of being judged. You're scared of how maybe it will change how they look at you. Maybe there are all these fears that you might be experiencing and just suffering with on your own. And yet you don't have to. Talk to someone about it. Talk to someone trusted or go to a professional and talk it out with them. But just try and work out what is it that is making you feel reluctant to share that information.
Also, Esther asks, how do you deal with a partner that is still abusive even when you have done all that you think is necessary to make the relationship work?
That's a heavy question. That's quite a heavy question. Because then for me it raises a lot of other questions that I would want to ask and understand the situation better. Because Esther is sharing that they feel like they've done, or this person in question has done everything possible, um, and yet the person is still abusive. In cases of abuse, it's a lot to do maybe with anger management or maybe with substance use, but the person, the perpetrator as it were, also has a lot of work to do within themselves, because then why do they feel that this is the only way that they can express their distress or that they can express the emotions that they're experiencing? Sometimes it's not so much what I need to do to stop this other person from hitting me. Sometimes this person is making that choice and there's nothing I can do to stop them. So again, that's a question we would want to have a conversation over, and try and understand what is it that's really happening. But for me, my first concern is safety, safety, safety. Are you safe wherever you are? Are you able to get to safety? Are you able to ensure that you're not being hurt? Maybe there are resources to share that can get you access to services where you can have some of these conversations and resolve. But then again, the thing to remember, a relationship takes two people. So it's not, the onus is not on one partner to fulfill the needs and desires of the other. It's something that you need to do together. And sometimes you make sacrifices to meet your partner's needs, but then you cannot sacrifice everything, including your own safety and your own life.
Uh, is it a red flag when a husband doesn't want to have a conversation when the wife does? The person keeps postponing and later sweeps it under the carpets.
So that does sound like one of our four horsemen. Um, so I don't like answering questions yes, no, because sometimes it's not always black and white, but it is worth investigating, because then you want to understand what is it that they're sweeping under the rug. Are they feeling like it's a conversation we've had before? Are they uncomfortable? Um, are they just not able to to express themselves? Sometimes it's just a matter of having giving that person the audience or the floor in order to express themselves. So what is it? What is their issue with having that discussion? And sometimes again, if you feel you're not able to get through to somebody on that one-on-one, if you're feeling like it's just not happening, perhaps couples therapy is something you could explore. Mediation, again, sitting with the wazee, whatever it is that you feel comfortable as a couple, then try and use that avenue to sort out that issue.
We also have a question from our Facebook viewers and listeners. There's a trend, actually, an emerging issue among our Kenyan youth on matters, relationships and depression, and settling early in marriages. How best can they be guided on these vital matters? And what is the best advice you can offer them? Because some, especially the ladies and even young men, sign off their lives early before realizing it.
So then, if it's looking into going into marriage, it's always a good idea to go for your own premarital therapy, because when you're in that forum, you're able to discuss. Obviously, there's no manual. I mean, if there was a manual that we had, we'd have happier relationships. But then you do what you can with what you have. So go for that. Go create that space where you can go for premarital therapy. If you're already married and you felt maybe you rushed into it, then go for couples therapy, because maybe you didn't have conversations around creating boundaries, sex, money, religion. What is it that makes you feel like you rushed into it? We are seeing a trend where people get pregnant and they're actually told the only thing to do here is to get married. Yeah. And is that always the solution? Can we even prepare families in a better way to come together? Because then, if you're now bringing people together just because someone got pregnant, then there are a lot of things that we have not dealt with. There are a lot of expectations that this person has. Um, and it was something that happened when they came together in an intimate moment. So then, being able to just take a step back and go for that therapy, go for that mediation, whatever it is that you need to do, please do it. Because then, if you're feeling you rushed into something, there's a lot of unsaids that are happening, and it all is not lost. Like I said earlier, you can learn a lot of skills in couples therapy, and also get to build a sound relationship.
Um, we also have a question. How do you go about the scenario where one partner has not changed for 8 years in his destructive habits, and each time he tries, he's put down by the spouse that he will slip back in 2 weeks? He therefore is not motivated and looks for more harmful coping mechanisms like alcohol.
So when someone is trying to change self-destructive behavior, sometimes it's well worth it to have that individual go through their own individual therapy, and for the spouse as well to go through their own, so that they get to resolve the conflicts they're feeling within themselves. And then also they get to learn how to better support their partner. Because now, if your partner is trying to change for the better, then they need all the help they can get. They need a positive and supportive environment. So then, how can we work together to make sure that that happens without leaving the other partner feeling neglected, so to speak? Because sometimes when we tend to focus on one particular partner and the other one is feeling neglected, then maybe they self-sabotage or put the other person down. But then, if you're able to work together, a relationship is about connection, working together towards a common goal. So if you're trying to uplift your partner out of a self-destructive or negative coping habit, then for me, it's even a matter of both of you needing the support to be able to cope with that situation, and also building another larger network of support around you.
Someone asked, is there something like irreconcilable differences in a marriage?
Yes, there is. Because then when people have they feel like they've come to the end and they've done all they can to salvage their relationship, and it's not working, then they separate over irreconcilable differences. It's a term I think people use a lot when it comes to petitioning for divorce.
Sophie, the discussion is so interesting, whereby people are asking for your number. You'll share your contacts after this.
Okay.
We also have a question: how far should besties come into relationships?
How far should besties come
Come
into?
into a relationship.
How far do they want to go? Yeah, as in it's a choice the two of them need to make, because are they both wanting the same thing, or is maybe one person almost crossing a line? Maybe they've fallen for a bestie, but then the other person is not interested. So I think it's a matter of just asking, how far do they together want to go?
Thank you. Also, someone asked Miriam asked, how do I deal with anger during conflicts? One tends to act strangely and can even kill. Kindly
Oh,
give the tips for her.
so then if you're aware that when in conflict, you're not able to manage your emotions, for me, the first thing is to applaud the fact that you're aware that you get so charged that you feel like you could harm somebody. That's a sign that you have empathy and that you're scared of causing someone physical harm. So then, why not seek the help that you need in order to better manage your emotions? I think the other thing we need to remember is that it's perfectly healthy to experience both positive and negative emotions. What happens, um, or how we respond to certain situations is really the key thing. How we use some of the negative emotions we experience is important. But then, if you're feeling like you actually cause physical harm, then seek help so that you can learn how to manage your emotions better. But I applaud the fact that you're scared of hurting somebody, which also means that, you're not wanting to actually cause that physical harm. So then, within that moment, even just go back to the presentation when I was talking about when in conflict, being able to even calling a timeout. Yeah. If you're feeling like the argument is getting too hot and someone is going to get hurt, call a timeout, walk away from that scenario. If you need to call somebody to help calm you down, please do so. But causing physical harm to someone else is clearly not going to be, doesn't end well for either one of you. But then seek the help that you need to better manage your emotions.
Someone asked, a lot of women are going outside their marriage to seek comfort and romance, yet do not want to leave their marriages. Why so? And do you think this is so?
I don't even think it's just women. I think a lot of people, like you rightly put it, want to seek comfort outside of wherever it is. So if you're seeking comfort outside of that relationship, it means you feel you're not getting comfort within your relationship. What else do you feel like you're lacking? So remember, we go back to the questions we were asking ourselves in the beginning. Are you feeling like your needs and desires are not being met? Are you feeling like you're sacrificing too much? Because that's some of the reasons why people step out on their relationships. There's something they're looking for, and so they choose to go and look for it elsewhere. So then, just being able to understand what it is you feel, um, I don't know if you're having to feel like you need to seek for something outside of the relationship. What is that something? Identify it, name it, and then it's a matter of making a choice to see whether that's actually what you want, or are there other ways that you can maybe bring your concerns to the table, where you can actually have your needs and desires met to the best, to a logical sort of conclusion, or to the best of your partner's abilities.
Thank you. And also, someone says it seems that there's an assumption that if you carefully date and do courtship, then your long-term relationship will automatically be fine. How about someone who attended premarital counseling but still became hostile and abusive after joining marriage? Is the assumption therefore wrong?
No, it's not, and it's unfortunate that happened. Because then I guess it's an honor thing. You go into a relationship and into a marriage really with the pillars of trust and commitment. And so when you've given your all and then you get into it and like, this other party causes you emotional, physical harm, then you feel let down. You feel like they shattered your trust. Yeah. So, of course, the assumption is that we all come together and we will have a mutually satisfying relationship. It's not always the case. So, then maybe the other party was not feeling like their relationship was mutually satisfying for them. Um, then again, engaging in violent behavior, maybe there are other underlying conditions happening for that person. Again, they're not managing the emotions well, they're not able to expend their negative emotions, they don't know what to do with them. So they need to understand their emotional background and they need to understand um, how to not cause physical harm to another party. We need to understand why they're not able to show empathy. Are there other underlying psychological conditions happening? And sometimes these things don't come to the fore before you get married. Some conditions, become, they manifest themselves later. So it's not anybody's fault. So just getting a better understanding of that situation is what would help best with that individual.
Thank you. And so here we have a deep concern. Um, my husband raised a panga at me during an argument. A few hours later, he apologized. I think there's no hope in this marriage. Is it wrong to say that divorce is valid in such a situation? Encourage someone.
When oh my goodness, I'm so sorry that happened. Because then when someone raises a weapon, that's a big red flag. So safety first. Safety first. Because then, is that the first time it happened? Have they ever been hurt before? Maybe not with a weapon or a different sort of weapon. But then for me, it's a matter of safety first. What can we do to ensure that individual safety? So saying, feeling like the marriage is over, those are all sort of, what do you call it? Expected reactions to this unexpected sort of situation, right? And so even the fact that this has been done must be creating a deep sense of fear in that individual, a deep sense of anxiety, feeling like their foundation has been shattered. They don't feel like they're standing on solid ground. So it's not unexpected to have all these sort of confusing things. Please, please, please seek help. I know we've shared resources here previously. There's the hotline that you could call if you're in immediate danger, and we could sort of help set you up with different services. But safety, safety first.
Um, Rosemary asks, what do we refer to as irrecoverable differences?
I
What
think
is irrecoverable differences?
when we talk about irreconcilable differences, it may be unique to from couple to couple, case by case scenario. So it is what the couple is defining as irreconcilable differences. Sometimes you ask couples, what is that one thing you're not going to put up with in a marriage? For example, um, and some people say, intimate partner violence, others say infidelity, others say substance abuse. So for some people, they set out these things at the beginning and they're like, me, I'm not going to put up with this. And if now that is what has come to pass and the parties feel like, you did this to me, I told you I'm not going to stand for it, and you did this to me and I can't stand for it, the That is what we would call irreconcilable differences, but it is specific for it's like a case-by-case basis.
Someone asked if anyone has been married for a significant amount of time, then some suggestions are only purely theoretical. I think it's a concern. As long as the relationship is not abusive, one says it is what it is and remains in the union. What is the real life truth?
That's almost sounds like a sense of hopelessness. When we say it is what it is, it's almost like we've given up. Yeah. And is that really the case? Is that really the reflection for both parties, that they feel like there's nothing else to be done? Have we tried everything? So there's all the theories, yes, but like we say, vitu kwa ground ni different. So what is it that is qua ground? What is it that is happening that is making one say it is what it is? Because then that almost sounds like they've persevered for too long and they're just like, whatever the case may be. So we go back to the assessment of, are your needs and desires being met? Is it a mutually satisfying relationship? If not, why? What is it that you feel is making it not mutually satisfying to both parties? So having that evaluation, having that assessment of the relationship is important because it is unique, again, for couples to just be able to say, this has worked for them, but it's not working for us. So what is it that you've already done so far so that you can now come to that conclusion? And then there's always something you could try to see how to help you best.
Thank you. We also have a question. How do you deal with a partner who doesn't want to be seen with in public?
Okay. Why don't they want to be seen in public? Have you asked the tough question? What is it about being seen together in public that is so unnerving? I don't know. Sometimes I get the sense that we get scared of asking questions, but then if this person is, into you and into this relationship, then I think it's okay to ask, what is it that makes you uncomfortable about being seen in public? Um, some people, like celebrities, sometimes want to try and keep their public life separate from their private life. Is it that kind of scenario? Some people just want to control where they're being seen depending on the kind of work they're in. So then, just trying to understand what is it that makes appearing in public together uncomfortable for your partner. Have the conversation, communicate openly, communicate honestly, communicate well.
How would one convince a partner to seek help when they have decided to be incommunicado in marriage?
How do you convince one to seek help and they're not?
When they have decided to be incommunicado in marriage.
So then, I don't know if I follow the question. Is it that they're not
they're not able to communicate
in
with each
talking
other?
terms? Are they? Yeah. So you do get discordant couples or couples who are not able to just agree, or maybe what do you call them? Sometimes you have one partner who wants to seek therapy and one who doesn't. At the end of the day, you may not be able to force someone to do something, isn't it? Even you would not want to be forced to do something. Sometimes people say priorities shift. What is this shift that has happened? Are you able to do your own work to begin with? Yeah. Are you able to do your own individual therapy to begin with? Maybe sometimes you need to be the change you want to see. And you could start with yourself. Gentle persuasion often works better than coming across as forceful, because then if you're finding resistance, is it that you're pushing too hard and maybe need to change your approach, or become a bit softer in your requests. So make that evaluation, try and look at how you're doing it or how you're approaching it, and see whether that helps.
Well, this topic is so interesting, and I think we shall. I think we should carry it over to part 2 or part B, so as we can have another round of such a discussion. We shall answer the questions in that other session that we'll have, and I'd like to introduce my panelists. It has been an interesting one. Maybe we should have Dr. Catherine Gitao have a statement or two. Dr. Catherine?
Thank you, Cecilia. Yeah, it has been quite an interesting topic, very interactive session. I think what I'm taking away from this is the communication bit, in terms of letting your partner understand you better, and understanding their love language as well. I think is one of those things that is really key in relationship works. So I look forward to part 2. And thank you very much, Sophie.
Thank you, Doc.
Thank you, Dr. Catherine. Edith Koba, kindly, Dr. Edith.
Thank you very much, Sophie. Thank you very much, Cecilia. It has been very, very exciting. And one of the things that I have learned in the short practice of psychiatry is that quite a number of mental health issues actually are related to how we relate. And if we did better in our relationships, including in marriage, there are quite a number of mental health issues that would be averted. So we thank Cecilia for reminding us that it's about connection. And a lot of times we have a choice, and a lot of times it's something we can do. I keep saying that if many of us looked at our marriages, for example, or at our relationships, there will always be a reason to quit, whether it's because the socks were left by the door, or the bed was not made, or the shopping was not done in the supermarket you like. There will always be a reason that would drive you to want to quit. But we are being challenged today that because in the first place we chose to be in those connections, unless of course they are physically abusive or completely hurting, we are encouraged that we can work it out together. It's not one person working on it, it's both of us. And when you work it out together, when the connection remains, you are healthier physically and mentally, and you actually thrive as a person. So I encourage all of us to do whatever it is that we can to ensure that the relationships that we find ourselves in are working out well, because that impacts our own wellness. And we thank everyone for coming, and we look forward to part 2 so that we can continue enriching ourselves as healthcare workers, so that we can thrive in our relationships and hence thrive in the work that we do. Thank you. Back to you, Cecilia.
Thank you so much, Dr. Koba. Let's also have a say from Jacqueline Anundo. Jacqueline, are you there?
Yes, Cecilia, thank you very much. This has been very, very informative. And I agree with you that we need to have part 2 of this, because questions are still coming in. And I must say that communication is the greatest hindrance to a healthy relationship. And I think from looking at the comments and the questions, that seems to be the bone of contention in every relationship. So I look forward to part 2 of this wonderful engagement in our next webinar. Thank you very much, Cecilia. Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you so much. I hope as we proceed on, Sophie should be able to share her contacts. Several people have requested for her contacts. And also, we have had questions about CPD points, which will be sent to the email that you used to register for this particular webinar. so as we can also inform you on the next session, that is part 2 of this informative webinar. And also we would like to encourage all our healthcare workers and their families to kindly make use of the call center. We have a healthcare professional call center whereby we have professional medical and clinical psychologists who are readily available to assist you. We have a toll-free number which will be set up on your screen for us to see it. And also we can be able to call you back just in case we are able to find you available, and you'll be able to reach out. We have on screen, we have our toll-free number, the 0800 720 608. We also have the other numbers that are available that you can call us on, and you can. We have seen so much concern on the questions that we have had today, and we also have a premarital counselor in the team, and she will be able to assist you in such critical moments. We also have our Thursdays webinars, which are COVID-19 management. Kindly register, and our topic for Thursday will be COVID-19. Yeah, it's there on your screen. The topic will be there, COVID-19 vaccination. Kindly also make a point to tune in and listen. And as you've been alerted by Dr. Simon, COVID-19 rollout for Kenya is on Friday, 7 p.m. by the CAS, Dr. Mwangangi. Also make a point and tune in. We'd like to thank you all, and more so our guest today, Dr. Sophie. Thank you so much for having this wonderful presentation. I think it could have gone on for several hours answering the questions, but we're glad that we'll have another session for this. Thank you all and have a good night.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thank
Good night,
you.
everyone.
Good night.
Bye.
And I was hoping that we can note all the questions that were not answered before. I don't know, Cecilia, you have a better feel of that, so that we can take on from there before we end the meeting.
All right.
Peter, I hope you take a note so that you don't end the meeting before we take note of those questions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sophie. Cecilia, you've done a great job.
Thank you so much for your support also.
Yes, I hope you've captured the questions, yeah? Then we'll
Yeah, I
see
have
what
all
we
the screenshots.
Great. It's been awesome.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Doc. I hope you're well.
Yes, I'm very well, Sophie. You've been awesome.
That's
And thank you. We appreciate.
no problem. Have a
So I
good night
can
and a good
end
rest of the week. Sorry?
For someone asking for the recording, they can be able to watch it on YouTube, on the KMA YouTube channel, and also on KMA Facebook. Thank you and have a good night.
Okay, good night.
You've captured all the questions?
Yes.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.